Today we're going to be talking about class conflict and capitalism apology. And this comes from an article online written by this woman, Stephanie Williams, which is called 29-Year-Old Millennium Rips 25-Year-Old Yelp Employee Who Got Fired After Complaining About Her Salary. So basically, there was a 25-year-old woman, her name was Talia Jane, who was working for Yelp, and she wrote a letter to her boss or executive, whatever, that after taxes she's making $8 an hour, blah blah blah. So she was promptly fired. So Talia apparently posted an article about this, and then this woman Stephanie Williams replies. And what does Stephanie basically have to say? Well, she wants to talk about the work ethic. She writes. Despite our less than decade difference in age, it seems we are worlds apart in the concept of work ethic. But somehow I'm not surprised. Those 5 little years are incredibly important. This begs the question, what is the work ethic and where does it come from? As far as I can tell, the work ethic should just be called the slave ethic. It's an ideology that says work in and of itself is good and should be done no matter how technologically and socially pointless it is. Never mind the waste of all those hours doing bullshit rather than what could be done if people actually had more time to do things that matter. Fuck that. Work is good because work is good. You should work more. Everyone should work. If you don't work, then how are things going to happen? So you need to work more and more and more. Never mind that the work you're doing is bullshit. If you don't do the bullshit, society can't function. It's a total contradiction, but it's just nonsensical jargon that somehow defends the way things are because we're living in a system where people have to do all this pointless work. So, of course, we have to have a vacuous ideology that defends it. When it comes down to it, if something is worth doing, you're going to do it without the work ethic. I'm a naturopathic doctor in private practice. I don't go in to see people because of the work ethic. I go in to see people because I believe in what I do, and it's important for me to basically see them and help them. That's what I want to do. It's it's not about work ethic. That's irrelevant. Work ethic equals slave ethic. If you need a work ethic to tell you to do something, it's bullshit. No one is going to find anything worthwhile doing and say, well, I have to do this because it's the work ethic. Can you imagine like a surgeon going into like a heart transplant, for example, and who's going to say, well, I'm doing this because of the work ethic. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother. I mean, it's just stupid nonsense. But it feeds the system as it is. So in this case, we have someone working long hours at Yelp, and instead of questioning, this system exist? Should we even have a Yelp? Should this socioeconomic system exist or function as it is? Just bypass this. Well, if you don't want to do the work, you're lazy, so fuck you. And the work ethic is often presented as a matter of maturity when it's in fact a matter of class consciousness. There's a long bloody history in the US of people fighting and dying for the 8-hour workday. But if someone doesn't know that and they are basically been propagandized and programmed by the system as it is, then they'll just start bitching out. You have to work more. You should get one job. You should get 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever it takes. You're lazy. You get these things from people who have no concept of class. So, what most of this article is about Stephanie Williams talking about how great a person she is. And she goes into this whole rant about how she didn't have any money and she had to work this crappy job as a bartender. And then she goes on to say, and just quoting her exactly, 6 months later, I was off in the weekend bartending shifts for the month of December. Long hours, lots of stress. I smelled like bad citrus and stale beer most of the time. I had to miss Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and New Year's Eve with my family and friends. But I jumped at the opportunity. And all of a sudden, after about a year, I was making enough money to live. And after several years, I was making enough money to live well. A year later, I was making enough money to move into the city with my best friend. I worked 4 days a week, making anywhere between 50 and 60,000 a year. So what she's really doing is saying, well, my crappy job somehow worked for me, so fuck you. And capitalism apologists do this weird bullshit game a lot, where instead of looking at the consequences of aspects of capitalism over large populations, they'll find particular instances of something and say, well, because in that particular instance it worked out, therefore that's the general rule, even though a cursory glance at the system will show that's not the general rule. Like, for example, just move away from this for a second, you might hear people argue about ethical capitalism and how there's this company that's making money and they are standing by these ethics and doing things that are good for the environment or whatever. And then they'll use this to say that's the type of capitalism we need. That's what capitalism has to become. Well, when yeah, well, there might be little niches that exist that might allow for that, but as a general rule, capitalism is something that creates waste and doesn't care about the environment and just wants to basically eat up resources for profit. You're not actually analyzing the system. And what we have here, that Stephanie does, and you see this so often, is people will say, well, it worked for that person, so therefore fuck everyone else. Like Oprah Winfrey came from nowhere, made billions of dollars. Therefore, that proves capitalism makes sense. No, no, it doesn't. So because this woman made money as a bartender, that doesn't prove that the capitalism system that we have in the United States right now is functional. Well, it doesn't say that everyone who works a crappy job is going to somehow move up into making more money. How many people just have shitty jobs and they're stuck there? Which is something actually Stephanie says later in the article. So she's kind of contradictory. But her whole argument is, oh, I worked a bad job. It worked for me, so fuck you. And you sicken me. You disgust me because you want stuff handed to you. Now, if you understand the history of class conflict, you should understand that someone who works 8 hours a day, should expect that they should have enough to live on comfortably. Stephanie repeatedly also does this game, which reminds me of George Orwell, I believe, writing in Road to Wing and Pierre, where they talk about you have poor people, and then someone comes around and says, well, you're really poor and you complain you need more money, but why did you spend money on this and that? So Stephanie, throughout the article, takes little jabs at Talia for just not being frugal enough with her money and so forth. I remember George Orwell kind of writing, people are not going to tally up every little cent they get and essentially do everything perfectly. That's just not the way people work. You're talking about a system which is oppressing them. That's the bottom line. And considering the level of technology we have available, the level of resources, people should expect that, hey, if they have a job and they're working full time, that they should make a decent living. That's the point. The point is we are living in a system of exploitation. Stephanie Williams doesn't understand that. And this article is kind of written under this idea that this is a generational issue, that maybe generations that came before understood the work ethic and now the new generation doesn't. And, this is all bullshit. This whole work ethic thing, that people need to work more. This is going on and on for as long as there's capitalism. And what keeps people from working 16 hours a day is class consciousness. It is labor movements, that type of thing. You take that away, what happens? How many hours are people going to work on this bullshit? Stephanie Williams, you basically, you're like an asshole because you just write this crap online insulting someone who's taking home $8 an hour and gets fired, and you reduce everything down to the individual. If this person had enough of a work ethic, if this person took enough responsibility for themselves, if this person took a bad enough job, and so your argument is if everyone just took really shitty jobs and worked excessive hours, somehow the system would work. That's the capitalism apologist right there. They don't engage in system analysis as a rule, where they don't ask, do we need a system where people have to do all this labor? And they don't ask, what is all this labor going to? The fact that this labor is essentially, the accumulation of this labor is going to give wealth to about 1% of the population, then that's what the system is. That it's a system of exploitation against the poor. That there are numerous mechanisms, such as having to pay fees for credit cards and so forth, and then interest going to the ruling class, those type of things, or just better education, or if you come from an upper class or a family with more money, we can go on of benefits of being in the upper class and how this system perpetuates a ruling elite that hoard all the wealth. You can just in the world of Stephanie Williams, oh fuck all that. It's just about the individual and work ethic. So again, we can see this has nothing to do about millennials or whatever you want to call it, younger people or whatever for nonsense that is. It's not about the work ethic. It's about exploitation. And when you live under capitalism, it's like that becomes the dominant ideology, and people just keep on repeating um, talking points of capitalism. They just repeat nonsensical excuses for capitalism, anything other than analyze the system as a whole. What I find really on a personal level, this Stephanie Williams, she just comes off as emotionally angry, like she's writing online trying to talk down to someone, trying to make someone feel bad, trying to make someone feel depressed. Uh, this is kind of I don't know what the word is, when you just do something to a stranger online to just make them feel bad and to go through this tirade to act like it's really personal and how you're disgusted and to try to point out their personal defects. I don't know. What do you call this? Maybe Stephanie Williams should take a look at herself and realize that the crappy work she had to do was a result of a system of exploitation. And instead of being proud of that exploitation that she went through, she should realize that we need to build a better system where other people don't have to do that. Okay, that's it. Bye.